Good afternoon and welcome to AIADA's AutoTalk. I'm your host, Rachel Soleimani. A reminder that anyone who is registered for today's program will be receiving a copy by early next week. And if you have any questions, be sure to enter them into the Q&A bar at the lower right-hand side of your interface. Now, please join me in welcoming experts from CNA National's Income Development Team, Raleigh Page, Greg Sexton, and Rob Preston. A fun fact that I always like to point out, CNA National is AIADA's longest tenured partner. They've been with us for 30 years. We treasure this partnership and are so glad to have you all on, so I'm going to let you take it away.
Well, thank you, Rachel. Appreciate it. My name is Greg Sexton, and I am a member of CNA National's Income Development Team. Our team is excited to be presenting today's topic, F&I is a team sport. A little bit about CNA. CNA National employs over 300 people in Scottsdale, Arizona, and some of us have been with the company a long time, some as many as 30 plus years. We were acquired in 1995 by CNA and operated as an independent subsidiary ever since. So with me today are my good-looking partners here, Raleigh Page and Rob Preston. Between the three of us, we have 50 plus years of retail experience in finance management, sales management, and also over 25 years in the income development field. So as I mentioned earlier, the topic today is F&I is a team sport. And so I guess we'll start with what exactly do we mean by that, right? So what we know is that in today's market with today's educated buyer, the old every man for himself or department for itself approach when it comes to sales and finance is just no longer effective. Not when it comes to producing the kind of results that we need for the finance income. So every step of the sales process, beginning with the very beginning with the sales consultant, then into the sales management team, it's got to be managed in a way that just consistently sets up the finance department for success. We got to realize that finance-related objections and questions are going to come up. They're going to come up before the finance managers got an opportunity to be involved, right? So we have to train to prepare our sales departments accordingly. We've got to train our salespeople and our sales managers so that we can actually kind of control the way these questions and objections are handled. As always the case, that's training, is the key. And the process that we train as a team, it addresses these issues. It addresses them with consistent word tracks and strategies that kind of assist rather than undermine the finance department, kind of prepares the customer to be receptive and engaged. Okay. So we're going to, today's presentation is going to be divided into 4 sections. Those sections are going to be the 3-step endorsement. This is a process that we train salespeople to help prepare and endorse the service contract. The second thing is we're going to talk about is total yield mentality. That's where we're going to get the sales desk involved and talk about how we can desk deals with a total yield mentality that helps properly set up things for the finance department. Third, we're going to get into a few strategies. Once everybody does their job up front, a couple of strategies that we're utilizing that help finance managers once the customer gets to them. And then we're going to wrap it up with what we call completing the customer care circle, which is just kind of a way to finish off the whole process and get the customer back to the salesperson. So before we do that, I want Raleigh to talk a little bit about why it's more important than ever that we adopt this kind of a team concept in today's market.
Thanks, Greg. It's been said for years, if not decades, but dealers today are dealing with customers that are more educated and informed than ever before. A lot of times the customers, thanks to Google reviews, know more about not just the cars, but the dealership, its employees, not to mention incentive programs and financing options available to them and whether or not they qualify. With this information, our teams are forced to audible with customers more than ever in the sales process. You hit the nail on the head earlier, and the lines have always been blurred, but now the walls between departments have to come down. All departments must work together as one team from start to finish. The days when sales and finance operate independently, if not despite each other, are coming to an end. Everyone from salesperson to finance manager are all in this together and must put aside their egos to win more than our fair share. All of this leads to an opportunity to shift our priorities and processes to being more in line with each other. Ideally, this will put the customer in a more comfortable and receptive state during the buying process. What we're going to be sharing with you today is the basis for a culture shift to playing as one whole team instead of different departments. This shift, as Greg will share with you, starts with the salespeople themselves. Greg, would you mind kicking us off with a 3-step endorsement?
Absolutely. So, like Raleigh said, the three-step endorsement is the first thing that we do. We talk about how it begins at the front door, right, with the salesperson. So, how do we get the salespeople to be part of our process and help it rather than undermine it? Well, we train a process called the three-step endorsement. This is simply exactly what it sounds like. It's three different steps where we ask the salesperson 100% of the time and consistently with the word tracks that we give them to endorse the service contract throughout their road to a sale. The first step is at the walk around. We all know that when you're doing a vehicle walk around demonstration, whatever you want to call it, and one of the things that we always cover is the factory warranty if it's a new car. We talk about what's left of the warranty if it's a used car, or what we are offering on that car if it's out of factory warranty. So what we would simply add in there is we're going to have the customer, when they go over this warranty, to have a word track similar to this right here. This vehicle comes with a 3-year, 36,000 mile manufacturer's warranty. But this vehicle also qualifies for extended coverage, which you can explore with whoever the finance manager is. So this is how we're going to plant that seed, just kind of drop that service contract mentioned the very first time. And we do realize and we train and prepare for whatever response or questions we might get as a salesperson at that point. Rob, what are some of the things that we need to kind of prepare these salespeople for at this point?
Yeah, that's a good question because we know that there's always questions that are coming from the consumer. So first and foremost, it's good just to separate yourself as the consultant, letting that customer know that you're here to find the right car for them, get them on the road in the right vehicle that's affordable for them. And then the finance manager is truly the expert in the area of what the additional benefits are as far as coverage. They know all the different plans and the terms that are available. But most important, we want to make sure that the sales consultants are doing a proper TO and endorsing those products. So just making a statement as simple as, a lot of my customers take advantage of it. Those are some great ways that you can get the customer thinking in that direction.
That's a good point. And I love that whole idea at the end of saying, and most of my customers take advantage of it. That not only endorses it, but it also gives that little transfer of trust a little bit there. So we don't want them selling it. We just want them bringing it up. So that's step one, right? Step two is at the trade appraisal. So obviously, anytime there's a trade, we want to find out whether or not the customer has a service contract on that vehicle, or if they ever bought one on that vehicle at any point, right, when they bought it new. We're simply going to ask that question every single time, 100% of the time. Does this vehicle have a service contract, or did you buy one on it new? And the reason we're going to do that is going to follow it up with this next word track, which is because my appraiser typically puts a little bit more value on a vehicle that's been covered under a service contract because he knows it's been well taken care of. That's all true. It all is important. It lets us know right then whether or not this vehicle has a service contract so that we won't find out later. Why is it so important, Rob, for us to know this early in the sales process whether or not this vehicle has a service contract on it?
Yeah, really good question, Greg. I mean, basically out of the gate, we want to make sure that the communication is clear from the sales consultant to the used car manager who's actually appraising the vehicle. And it makes the customer feel more comfortable in knowing what's exactly going on. And then just the point that you had made, if there's a cancellation as far as a service contract or any other contracts are on the trade-in that they're trading in today, that money can be canceled and used as far as a down payment towards the vehicle that they're going to drive off the lot with today.
That's a great point. I think it's important to point out that when we ask these kind of questions and we make these points, it lets the customer know that these products that we're going to eventually be trying to sell them in the finance office actually have value, even if they don't use them. They have value because we feel like the car is going to be worth more money. And we don't want the first time this comes up to be in the finance office when we're presenting products and the customer goes, oh man, that reminds me, I need to cancel the one I have on my current vehicle. That leaves cancellation money on the table that we could have used to help work our deal without cutting gross, and just makes everything go smoother. So that's step two, very important. Step three is, of course, the final one, which is turn over to the finance manager. Now, this is just that very simple word track where we say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, don't forget to ask Sam about the extended service contract that I mentioned earlier. Obviously, depending on the feedback that the salesperson has gotten from the customer up to this point, during the first two endorsements, if they've gotten negative feedback, the finance manager is going to communicate with the salesperson. They may ask them not to do it at this point so that they don't start off with a negative. But being able to get that information allows the finance manager to prepare for that. But if it has been positive at that point, this is a perfect little transition directly to the finance manager. So that's the three-step endorsement. It's very simple. We're going to train it every single time without exception. don't appraise cars if we don't know the answer to the question. Just has to be done every single time, and it sets things up for the right process going into finance. So once the salesperson's done their part, we also need to train the sales desk, right? So that's our next step by working deals with what we call that total yield mentality. Raleigh, explain a little bit about what I mean by total yield mentality.
Absolutely, Greg. As we touched on earlier in the presentation, the reality being faced by dealers across the country is that pandemic selling approaches no longer work. Market competition has become fierce, and battles between dealers are compressing front-end grosses at a rapid pace. In fact, I would bet that some of the people listening are even asking themselves, what front gross? A shift in mindset is needed towards one that looks at the deal as a whole from the desk rather than focusing on maximizing the front and letting the finance deal with the fallout. Team focus and effort to having all hands on deck will allow us to, instead of taking large front gross with little to no opportunity on the back end, to a position of realizing that if we work each deal properly, sometimes it is much more advantageous to shift some of that focus as we look at each deal from a total yield perspective, holistically, front and back combined. This approach does require finance and sales to both step out of their respective comfort zones and over-communicate whenever possible. Greg, how can we involve everyone in the finance process from the beginning?
It's a good question because we have to do it. Like these examples are pretty simple. Everybody knows that $3,000 is more than $2,000, right? And the examples can be much greater benefit on the back end and the total yield when this process is done properly. So we have to involve everybody early. We start with, as far as team involvement, we start with the salespeople, like we talked about earlier. We're going to train the three-step endorsement every single time. We have to do it. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to train word tracks. So I mentioned earlier that we know that these objections and questions about finance are going to come up early in the process. Well, we're not just going to. We know that the salesperson is going to answer them. We want to control the way they answer them, right? We want to make sure that they're answering them the exact same way that we want them to every single time. So we're going to give them word tracks. Make sure that they're handling all those things exactly the way we want them to, rather than just taking whatever they say as okay. We know that they're in our best interest. They're going to answer these questions. Well, we don't know that. They may try to help us and end up not actually helping us. So we're going to train those word tracks, train the three-step endorsement, make it a requirement. Then it goes to the sales desk, right? We talked about the total yield mentality. They have to have that total yield mentality when they're working deals. We've got to be consistent when we desk deals. Every sales manager should desk deals with the same first pencil rate if we don't have credit, for example. Every sales manager, if anybody's going to pencil a deal that has a finance product on the deal when they pencil it, everybody should do it the same way every time. The other thing that the desk has to do is they have to let the finance department be involved. Welcome the finance manager up at the desk. Make sure that if there's any kind of finance objections or questions, they give the finance manager an opportunity to go address that and talk to the customer before we start giving up back end. The other thing they have to do is 100% TO. Make sure that every time we get a commitment from a customer that the finance manager is involved, help control the outside lien, help control the cash deal situation. That's the sales desk. So once everybody else does their job, then the finance manager has his responsibility. He's got to be involved. He has to be available to desk. If he's not doing a deal, he's not cleaning up a deal or in front of a customer, especially if you have a rotation and he's next, right, or she. Be at the desk. Be ready to be up there to help, to take a TO, to answer any questions when it comes to finance objections or questions, and also help sales managers structure the deal. That make sense, Raleigh?
Absolutely. Extremely well said. Everyone that's involved, from sales, desk to finance, all have to have an eye on total gross rather than just their specific area in the house. Finance teams alone can no longer be responsible for maximizing deals' profitability. It has to become a team sport. With proper training and education, we'll also help head off and avoid some opportunity loss to outside finance as well. When we can get finance involved directly as soon as it's suspected or mentioned during the sales process, we can then shift our sales process if need be. Let me back up for just a moment. Early involvement in the finance team is not limited to when we have a customer present, aka game time. Being involved in the training and preparation of the sales team will grow their knowledge of our new playbook and hopefully present missing opportunities out of answering questions and accidentally hurting ourselves by answering them incorrectly or unsurely. Now that we have everyone on the same page to properly set up the finance department, Rob, what are some strategies that we might share with finance managers to help maximize these opportunities?
Yeah, thanks, Raleigh. So let's talk a little bit about some strategies for today's consumers. I think we would all agree when processes are followed that the yields are typically higher. As we just reviewed in our 3-step endorsement of the vehicle service contract that we're trained the sales consultants, we wanted to share a few of the techniques we're using, the strategies we're using, and some of the stores we're working with today that are in the F&I office. So as we get into our first example, it's important to acknowledge we can't control the future. However, we can certainly prepare for it. One of the biggest challenges I think we're all facing is the rising costs of both parts and labor, and that's referring to claims as they flow in and out of the service department. We're understanding that in return, this does create an increase in the overall cost of the everyday service contract. One of the greatest statements, though, that we've been using in the F&I office for many years is, Mr. Customer, you can lock in tomorrow's services at today's pricing. This statement certainly rings true for a variety of benefits available to protect the customer's vehicle purchase. So a couple examples I want to give you. 2021, the tire pressure monitoring component went from $260 in cost all the way up to $410. And that's a 58% increase in just 4 years. Another is a near object camera, which is the camera that we utilize to help with parking and provides more safety, so we have a better view all around. And it went from $573 to $876, which is again 50% plus, a 53% increase in just 4 years. So with this type of increase, the customer who purchased a service contract 4 years ago has put themselves in a better position today in getting in front of inflation. So how do we get here with the customer when presenting and selling today? We're finding by asking some interactive questions within your service contract presentation with your customer in the F&I office and getting that customer in agreement with us. So we want to gain agreement with the F&I manager. That's how we're getting better results. So, for example, a few questions here in a statement. Mr. and Mrs. Customer, would you agree that vehicles have changed quite a bit in the last 5 to 8 years? So if that customer drove in on the lot, they plan on trading in their vehicle, and that vehicle is a 4-year-old vehicle, we know that's going to be a lot different than the one they're about to drive off today if it's a new car. Next question, would you agree that the technology is much more complex than it was just a few years ago? Again, if that mom or dad drove in on the lot and the vehicle that they drove in on is getting passed down to the son or the daughter, we know on the vehicle that they're taking home today, the technology is going to be much more complex than what it was on the one they're passing down. So last but not least, we want to make sure we're making this statement the customer understands. We feel we positioned ourselves ahead of the game because of the way the exclusionary policy has been written. So, Greg, with that information and some of the questions that we're asking, what do you see as some of the other challenges we'll be facing as additional technology is getting placed on these vehicles going forward?
That's a great question. And really the challenges that are faced by the consumer, really because of all the rapidly changing technology, and the opportunity is with the finance manager to point that out. You just made the point, you asked the question about, would you agree that vehicles have changed quite a bit in the last years? If you're selling an exclusionary contract that was written 4 or 5 years ago, you can point out to that customer, by definition of an exclusionary contract, these contracts today are covering parts and stuff that didn't even exist when the contract was written. So obviously that's not going to change. That's going to get more and more as we go forward. So we sell the customer on the idea of the fact that you're going to pay for tomorrow's repairs at today's prices, and maybe even some things that we didn't even know we were covering, right? 3 or 4 years down the road, these exclusionary policies may not even be able to exist anymore because of the rapid change in technology. And no matter what, we also know that these customers are going to be paying more money for less coverage. And that's how we convince them that it makes more sense to do it now than to wait till later.
Great points. Okay, let's move on to example number 2. So I think we could all say, since being in time as F&I trainers and spending time with income development, we have that discussion that offering the best protection available every time makes the most sense when you're sitting in front of a consumer. However, I do think that things have changed a bit with the increase of service contract costs, and we know that's triggered by the frequency and severity of claims in general. Every year, each of us gets an opportunity to enroll in our healthcare benefits. And like your company, often there are many packages to choose from. We believe this mentality can help provide a slightly different approach when initiating the conversation regarding a service contract. What is the consumer's appetite for risk? We need to find that out. We know that not every customer needs a 10-year, 150,000 mile vehicle service contract. If we're taking the proper steps, doing a proper interview with the customer, majority of the time that term of coverage will overinsure their vehicle and can potentially take them out of their trade-in cycle. So let's talk about a few questions that could help you out in finding out what their appetite for risk is in the F&I office. First one, have you had any negative experiences with vehicle repairs in the past? We know when we're sitting with a consumer or customer, they like to talk about it themselves, or they like to share some experiences if they've had one, especially sometimes if it's a negative one. They want to get that off their chest and they want to talk about what went wrong with the vehicle. What are your biggest concerns with owning a vehicle? I know I've heard this in the past. The last thing I want to do is purchase a vehicle and it's sitting in the garage and I'm still making the payment, or it's down at the repair facility and I'm making a monthly payment on it, but I can't drive it. So these are some things we can find out just by simply asking those questions to see what their appetite for risk is. And what are your thoughts on the new technology that's included in the vehicle that you're purchasing today? That gives you a great question leading and going over the vehicle service contract and what is and isn't covered. So with that being said, Greg and Raleigh, is there any other things you want to touch on before we move on to example number 3?
I think these are great points. And I think it's important for people to realize that we're thinking about a strategy that doesn't involve cutting our gross, right? So many times in the finance office, we offer the best plan, and then when we get an objection that's either cost or payment related, we start either discounting or dropping deductible or term or whatever, and we don't change the actual coverage plan. So a lot of times we'll get that second no, and then we'll move on, and the customer could leave our office without ever knowing that there was different stated component coverage available, that we wouldn't even had to cut our gross in order to sell. So it's just a good way to be able to negotiate without having to cut gross.
Yeah, great point. Thanks for that. Okay, example number 3. We're going to talk about PVR when it comes to cash deals. So we know every opportunity that permits itself to do a cash conversion, we want to take advantage of, because we know that a lot of times customers are a lot more open to purchasing benefits of protection when the deal goes through finance as opposed to cash. However, I think our mentality and some of the things we've been doing in our stores, it's changed a little bit. So why not just get better at selling on those cash deals? One of the strategies we've been focusing on in our stores is simply setting goals in the F&I departments on the PVR just on cash deals specific. So each month in our initial meeting, we go around the group and have every F&I manager set their goal on what they believe and want to shoot for on their PVR regarding the cash deals that they touch. This provides a lot more accountability and focus when we consistently highlight where they're at during a month. There are also ways to make it fun and competitive. So for one, you might do the products per deal, so PPD. Whoever has the highest that week is a winner. And the next week might be whoever has the highest gross on a single deal. You might get some long-term employees there. Maybe you make it an annual bonus. There's just different things that you can do. But getting, some buy-in from a general manager and or GSM to commit to an inexpensive way to be competitive and fun, such as a lunch or a gift card, is a great way to keep it fun and interesting as we work through the month on those cash PVR deals. Greg, is there anything else that I missed that maybe you want to touch on that we're doing in stores or that you're doing, that you're focusing on keeping your F&I manager focused?
I think that these are great ideas, Rob. And I can tell you, me personally, this is a huge focus in my stores. I think it's very important to recognize the fact that our old outdated way of looking at cash deals is just no longer acceptable. That old mentality of, hey, it's a cash deal. Let me get them in here, get them out. They're not going to buy anything anyway. I want to get on to the next finance deal. It's just It's not correct. These customers, if they've got money to pay cash for a car, they've also got money to pay for our products, right? We should assume that our products are just as valuable to cash customers as they are to finance customers. So why do we accept such a huge difference in what we expect of our finance department on those deals versus the finance deals? So this whole process, we know that people work their pay plan, right? So putting these kind of goals and these contests and everything, it's a great way to get people motivated in the right direction. But the main thing is just change that mentality and change what we accept from those finance managers on these cash deals. I think you made a great point talking about getting the sales managers, the general manager, get them involved, put them in those little competitions too. I think we all have some sort of software that tracks all of even what our salespeople and sales manager, what their average income is when it comes to finance, right? And most of them probably get paid on finance. So why not incentivize them also? So let's start doing better on cash deals. Let's get 100% TO. Let's not let people come in with checks already written, right? Let's get everybody on board with changing the mentality of what cash deals mean in the finance department.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. All right. So as we bring it home, Raleigh, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Appreciate it. Really well said, guys.
Thank
When
you.
we say completing the customer care circle, what we're referring to is the turnover back to sales from the finance manager and doing so in a professional way. Once the deal's paperwork has been completed, the finance manager has an obligation to handing that customer off properly so that they don't drop the ball and have the customer wandering around the showroom wondering, where do I go? What happens next? What should I do? This handoff presents an opportunity also to directly ask for referrals. If we've done a great job of helping this customer, we're well within our rights to ask for future business. This would take place by asking something like, Mr. Customer, I know you mentioned earlier how great this buying experience has been. Who in your circle of friends or family would you feel most comfortable sharing a name and number to your salesperson so they can have the same great experience as you did? We've seen this, when executed properly, lead to unexpected and higher grossing deals that help to reinforce the sales team and that we're all in this together. Don't forget that we are asking the sales team's help with the 3-step endorsement. What better way to repay those efforts than to put another deal in their hopper and grow their sales? Working together consistently is the true example of F&I as a team sport. What we're talking about today is really more of a culture shift than a sales technique and sales process that creates a culture of teamwork. The process alone we've seen lead to immediate results of $200 to $300 PVR increases and VSC penetration going up by roughly 10%. Not to mention an average half-point product per deal more in ancillary products. Once we get the muscle memory down with this process, we're able to then start working on more advanced concepts and strategies with the team. What we see here is really just the beginning. Once we get the blocking and tackling down, we see results that greatly exceed the examples that are shown here. And that really wraps up what we had to share from our team today. From all of us on the CNA National Income Development Team, thank you so much for spending some time with us. And if anyone listening today wants more information or would like to ask questions now or later on, please use the QR code and landing email you see on your screen. We love the opportunity to discuss these ideas on behalf of the CNA National Team.
Thank you.
Guys, we had a couple questions come in, but I'm going to read one of them for right now just because of time. And the other ones, as you know, you can scan this QR code and you can reach them all directly if you have any further questions. So the question is, what are some of the obstacles or pushbacks that you typically see from management?
I'll take that one, you guys. So a lot of the times the obstacles and pitfalls that we see is just simply sticking to the process. You implement a process and you train everyone up. And next thing you know, 30, 60, 90 days goes by and there's a person or two that falls off or they don't adhere to everything that was put in place. So we never want to hear excuses. We want to hold everyone accountable. We want to keep the flow of what it is we put in place going because we know and understand that that'll create those better yields by simply kind of acknowledging those obstacles and pitfalls, but getting everyone back on the right track.
Just continuous training. Just stick with it. You got new people coming in. You just got to it's got to be continuous.
Yes.
Yeah. Consistency is key.
That's right.
Well, Raleigh, Greg, Rob, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing this wealth of information. I love this slide deck and everything that you've done with it. Again, to those on the line, you'll all be receiving a copy of this presentation by early next week. Join us back here next Tuesday, September 23rd at 2 p.m. Eastern as our newest affinity partner, Acumatic, talks about the future of automotive accounting. To learn more about AIADA, visit aiada.org. Thanks for joining us and have a great day, everyone.